All right, I think we are live. Hello, it is Thursday, July 12th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Marketing Live. I am your host, Amy Jorgensen, and today's live broadcast is Building a Higher Education Brand. Branding is no longer a dirty word in higher education. The discipline is being embraced by all types and sizes of institutions, and we must be well understood by effective university marketing practitioners. Today, we will learn from two marketing communication leaders at vastly different institutions on how to build a higher education brand. Marketing Live is part of a Higher Ed Live network. Our episodes offer you direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Be a part of our live broadcast by sharing your knowledge. Participate in today's discussion by tweeting us using hashtag HigherEdLive. All of our episodes are free and easy to access in the video archives at higheredlive.com, or take Higher Ed Live with you on the go by subscribing to the podcast. Storytelling is imperative if you want to build an enduring brand for your college or university. The digital space allows storytellers to immerse audiences even more fully in our stories by integrating and weaving video, photography, user-generated content, and other rich media throughout the marketing campaign. Are your readers at the heart of your institution's story? In a part 3 of M. Stoner's summer webinar series with their branding partner BVK, they'll arm you with the knowledge you need, storytelling principles, concrete planning steps, and best practice examples to ensure storytelling is at the heart of your integrated marketing communications. Register for the free webinar, Storytelling and Integrated Marketing Communications, on Thursday, August 23rd at 2 o'clock Eastern Time, and we'll be tweeting out the link shortly. All right, I'd like to welcome our guest today. We have Christy Harper, who is the Assistant Vice President for Marketing at the University of Arizona's Division of Student Affairs, Enrollment Management, Academic Initiatives, and Student Success. Welcome, Christy.
Thank you.
I was hoping I got that whole one there.
Yeah, it's the longest title ever.
We'd also like to welcome Brad Bolander, Chief Communications Officer of the Office Vice Chancellor for University Communications at North Carolina State University. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. So again, please do not hesitate to ask any questions as they come in using hashtag HigherEdLive, and I'll do my best to start off with questions of my own. So can we talk a little bit about how to discover your university's true brand and implement a brand strategy that helps achieve university and department goals?
Sure, I can start, Brad, and then you can jump in. I think the thing that you want to think, it's an extensive process, obviously, and there's really 3 components that you need to fully understand. You need to understand what we would call the 3 C's, the customer, the competition, and the company. This is from corporate branding. So obviously your customer is likely your students. It may be other stakeholders like alumni, et cetera. But you want to understand what drives that customer. What do they value? What do they care about? What do they need? What's not just their basic need, but what's their highest aspiration? Something that maybe only you can give them. Then you want to understand the competition. What is, and this, I think competition is a challenging one in higher ed because we tend to look at kind of our peers, but we may not be looking at our cross apps, right? We may not be looking at who we're actually competing with for students, but we may be looking at who we're competing with reputationally. I think it's important to have a mix of both. What are those schools known for? What are they putting out there in the market? What is the open territory or the blue ocean territory that we can uniquely claim? And then third is, what do we have going for us? What's the truth about us? What are we known as today? What do we aspire to be known as in the future? And how do we get there? And then you kind of create this Venn diagram of all those findings that hopefully reveals a sweet spot in the middle that allows you to have your brand positioning territory. It has to be authentic to who you are, but it also has to have enough stretch to lead you into the next 10, 15, 20 years. So there's also that balance between authenticity and stretch or aspiration.
Wonderful. So what are some of the steps to develop your brand architecture and how to tailor the brand for various units?
Well, I'll jump in on that one. I think for any brand project, and just to build on what Christy said, which I agree with completely, research is really the key. the only way you're going to pinpoint your true brand is to really invest time and the money it takes into research. And a lot of folks in higher education, we don't like to do that part, especially on the creative side. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it's boring. But especially in institutions like these that are so old and so decentralized in many cases, you'll have people who have been here for 20 years and they know everything and they know exactly where you stand in the marketplace and they know the audiences. But the truth is they really don't. And the only way to really pinpoint the things Christy was talking about, where you stand in the hearts and the minds of your constituents, is to invest in research. The other side of that, I think, is research gives you an unsurpassed opportunity at universities to build consensus and buy-in from the campus and alumni community. And I'm sure we'll get into some of that, but the way you involve them in the research, involve them in building the brand process, involve them in writing your brand platform, really creates a sense of understanding and ownership that can only be capitalized on by that research. When you have that data, you can move them from guessing to understanding to application and get to some of the things Christy was talking about. So with that kind of background, building the brand architecture or tailoring it to different units, when you start from that place, the community is engaged and has an understanding of your core brand. And then I think it's deciding what kind of brand you want to be. Most of higher education really evolved to the core brand model, where everything is really meant to build up and associate with that core brand. For us, it was the consistency that brought, and then allowing enough flexibility to allow the College of Design to be the College of Design and the College of Engineering to compete in that marketplace nationally. So for us, to be honest, we started with a pretty complex brand architecture that started with 4 different categories, expanded into about 8 different categories, and nobody understood it. So about 2 years in, we shrunk that down to 3. We have the core brand, we have extended brands, and we have sub-brands. And that's really based on, what is your mission? Does it match the core education, research, and teaching mission of the institution? And how are you funded? Those are really the 2 biggest factors. And based on those 2 factors, and the third really being external partnerships with NSF, with big industry, with folks we might need to co-brand with, that really dictates your place in the brand architecture. And we've actually found in this case, making it more selective, giving those 3 categories, has helped the campus community understand where they fit in that and really buy into that.
Do you find that the research is better done by outside entities, so that way they don't feel like you're controlling the message or controlling some of that? Or do you find that leveraging the resources inside are more beneficial at generating buy-in?
My opinion would be it's almost always better to outsource it. I do think that for a big project like this, I think there's a lot of times where you have smaller decision points that are very well handled internally. But I think when you're doing big research like this, exactly to Brad's point, where you've got a lot of people who have a lot of strongly held perceptions that may not line up with truth, it can be very helpful to have a third party come in and, speak that, identify that truth and speak that truth. So I think that's really key. And just, and Brad, what are your thoughts? Do you agree with that?
I agree completely, unless you're in a unique position to have the expertise to do that. And this may be getting into what we wanted to get into a little bit later, but I'm a big advocate for hiring consultants where you can, to bring in expertise that you don't have. And there's a few things that consultants can do really well. Number one is just that. They can bring expertise you don't. I think number 2 is, even if you have that expertise, you have a full-time job. This is usually an add-on. You don't stop your work to go through a brand project. So they have the time. A weird phenomenon about consultants are, we can stand on our campuses and say things 100 times. And you bring in an outside expert and they say it and everybody says, oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So you got to use that. You got to roll with that and not be offended by it. But they can also, to Christy's point, have those hard conversations with your president, with your chancellor, with your deans, that you may not be in the best position or really want to have. So I think bringing outside experts in who are used to doing this for universities, who can bring all of those things to the table is a real benefit.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak to that. I've been on both sides of that. So prior to starting at Cal Lutheran, I was a consultant, and I definitely see that difference of the in-house person at, you've got your honeymoon period that I'm probably still in at Arizona, where things I say are neat. And then, 6 months from now, things I say won't be so interesting anymore. They'll just be stuff she says. And a consultant can come in and bring that exact same message, but with a little bit more gravitas or a little bit more of an outside perspective. So I think it's always very valuable. Just to go back to the brand architecture conversation for a second, I think one of the things that I found most useful in working on architecture at my last institution, which was California Lutheran University, was allowing some flexibility for the different entities, however you sort of categorize them within your organization, allowing them to figure out a way to retain their core messaging that in a way that also ties into the brand's core messaging. And I think, we landed on a structure that worked where we sort of had a brand platform, and part of the brand platform was fixed, couldn't be changed no matter what the unit was. And then other parts of the brand platform could be customized for the individual unit. And Arizona has embraced a similar philosophy that I think is very useful and very effective at creating buy-in, because it doesn't say like, you have to use this message and only this message for the rest of your life, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't conform to your unit's needs. It allows for consistent but tailored messaging based on the needs of the unit.
That makes sense. Thank you. So how have you both created and launched a new brand identity and visual system?
You go, Brad.
Okay, I'll take this. So again, I'll be very repetitive. It's the research and it's the collaboration building. We built the brand platform with the campus community. And at that point, it was time to create those core brand foundational elements, your logo, your colors, and everything you would expect in a toolkit. So we had 30-some people in our shop kind of engaged in that part of the marketing arm. At the time, we're a campus of 35,000, 10,000 employees. And we knew that the 4 or 5 of us heavily engaged to that point were not enough to really roll this thing out. So our creative director at the time, Tim Jones, who's now at Beloit College, he really had a great idea. Let's spend some time really engaging our team in this process. So we had the designers go and do research about logos, about fonts, about colors. We had the content folks really look at research around language and match up the elements to what we really found in the research in the brand platform. And then we did something that was unique in my experience. We took several weeks internally, and we would get together with our entire team once a month or once a week, and we would give them real assignments. Go out and create an ad for the College of Textiles around this. Go out and write some copy for the College of Management around this, or go do this with design. Come back, critique it. They'd have to present it. They'd critique it. We'd mix up the teams for the next week. We'd put designers with news people, with web people. And over about 8 weeks, we got that group really comfortable with not only understanding and defending the brand, but applying it outside of their area of expertise. And I really felt it wasn't until then that really fine-tuned our brand toolkit, and we were prepared to roll that out to the campus.
Mm-hmm.
That's smart.
Arizona did something similar. I can't take any credit for it because it predates me, but they had the whole brand visual system and identity developed, and then gave it to campus communicators across the university, not outside of the central office, and had everybody work with it and bring examples of best practices and or things they were struggling with. And through that process, kind of refined the visual system to be something that everybody felt that they could work with more than the one that was inherited from the brand strategy firm in the beginning. So I think that was useful. At Cal Lutheran, I was responsible for creating a new brand identity for both the master brand, the university at large, and athletics. And actually had a failed attempt the first time because we were trying to find one identity that would work for both entities, and we just couldn't get there. We couldn't find one that coaches and deans agreed to. And I've since kind of realized there's a reason why most universities have two, an athletics identity and a master brand identity. And so the second time around, we decided to tackle those as two separate paths, and it went much more smoothly. There's always going to be critics. There's always going to be people who hate it and who wish that you would go back, and they like the old one. And why can't we just bring back that logo that we had in 1982? And, there's always going to be that. And you have to have kind of your president and your board have to have the intestinal fortitude to kind of weather all of that. That was another kind of key move that we made when we were launching both identities, but it was particularly pertinent with the athletics identity. Is I made sure that we had a vote from the Board of Regents saying we approve this identity, so that when we launched it and a donor freaked out or whatever, there was kind of no going back. The Regents had blessed it, and that took a lot of the heat off of the launch. We had some, the expected squawking, but it went away pretty quickly because it had already been fully endorsed by leadership, and people realized like no amount of squawking is going to change it.
So what was your mascot with the squawking? Was it a bird?
Oh, no. I'm just saying, I call people who criticize squawkers, that's just my own term. Our mascot that was another challenge we had. We had two, a male and a female. So Kingsmen for the men's teams and Regals for the women's teams. And we were trying to find one athletics identity that would unite both of those team names. We had two separate athletics identities. So not only did we have a master brand identity, we had a men's team's identity and a women's team's identity. It was a mess. So we had to clean all of that up.
I was going to get really excited, if you were going to say you were like the Ducks or something.
No.
That's hilarious.
No. Nope.
Well, and I think it's interesting that what you guys are talking about with some of the opposition that you've had to face. And at the University of Virginia, when I started, we didn't have colors, we didn't have fonts, we didn't have language, and our brand development team brought everything together. And what I found that was so interesting was that everyone was hungry for it. Like, oh my goodness, thank God I know what orange and blue colors to use. And oh, you guys are launching secondary colors. This is phenomenal. And I have language that I can use and I don't have to make this up. And our team launched a whole bunch of different, exactly like you said, different examples of the work and then templates. And just folks are eating them up. And it's made our work so much more unified, and it's made people's lives easier because you're not having to start from scratch, especially with design things. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right, great. So what are the best ways to align stakeholders to deliver and communicate in a brand aligned way that elevates the university and all of its divisions?
Well, I'll jump first at this one. I think some of it is what you just talked about, Amy, as far as having a group first that's going to take their leadership role. And for some of us, we were in the same place you were. We had a brand book that was a list of loose recommendations for graphic standards, but no teeth whatsoever, and no unified. I think we had more than 200 logos we found when we first started this. And it was an environment where communicators, often in the colleges and the units, because there wasn't a strong central unit at the time, they were left to doing things on their own. We were flooding the marketplace with a bunch of different identities because people didn't have a choice. So I think the first thing is really creating that leadership, and we witnessed the same thing. People were pleased to have that, and here are the resources. So building off of that, I do think the toolkit that you put together is a huge factor. We did ours completely online for that purpose, to continually get feedback from the campus community, what's working, what's not. Let's continue to adjust it, and creating tons and tons of downloadable templates, web templates, PowerPoint templates, research poster templates, creating several centrally funded platforms for the campus community. We created a digital magazine platform, for example, an HTML editing software that people could come and load their stuff, and we'll do a quick edit. And are you sending out in Bronto or another platform? From a content perspective, we created a central tool we call the AP Wire, which is, I'm sure, against trademark law, but it's just our internal name. But it works the same way. We share content across the colleges and the central unit. On-brand content we put on there, they put on there, and it just allows people to share really good content that will elevate the institution. And then we've found just a lot through creating partnerships. Mm-hmm. There's probably 3 to 4 times as many communicators outside of Central than we have inside. But we meet quarterly with all campus communicators, 150 or so folks. But we meet monthly with the lead communicators, and that's where we really invest our time. So really keeping on top of what do they need, partnering with them on advertising, recruiting, fundraising campaigns, investing not only in external marketing for the institution as a whole, but also where can we invest in our partners across campus and help them communicate on brand. So it's really investing in that partnership model, allowing them to do better work easier that makes them look good in front of their bosses. Mm-hmm. Has been a huge key, and I think getting everybody on the same page.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. It's all, and I see it now where I'm not in the central marketing office. I'm in a divisional role, and the partnership with the central office is huge in both ways for us to be able to say, hey, here's what we're hearing on the enrollment side. Here's what prospective students are saying. And then likewise, getting assets and support from them that are either, for us, a lot of brand identity stuff, but in the future, I think we'll be getting more brand strategy or brand positioning stuff. And how do we work together to make those tools effective is, I think, extremely important. And I think Arizona's central marketing unit has done a very good job of creating those relationships. Again, I have nothing to do with that except being on the receiving end in a positive way. So I think that's very important. I also think you cannot look anymore. It used to be in the old days, you would print the brand book, you would give it to everyone, and you would say, here's the rules, it's locked and loaded, and it wouldn't change until the next brand identity project in 15 years. Mm-hmm. And we just can't do that anymore. And that's an old-fashioned way of looking at brand strategy, or brand identity, but a lot of institutions still look at it that way. And I think the more evolved organizations, whether corporate or in higher ed, are looking at them as bendable and flexible and a starting point. You're not going to mess with the core logo. But what, even lockups, we're having a conversation right now about, we had a lockup system where we would put the division first and the brand, the university second. And it's actually not really working that well. And so we're trying to get, can we flip it? And, all of that is a conversation, and all of that is what's going to work best for the stakeholder to get the information that they need. So, having come through the brand strategy world in my earlier days, we never would have looked at a brand identity system as flexible until probably, the early 2000s, and then it just started to evolve. And now I think they've got to be really flexible, or you're just going to have rebellion.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Although I will say I saw a logo, and we're big on the rotunda here. I don't know if I even have a little rotunda with me, but it's this rotunda. And so they had each of the different pillars and, of course, the bottom. And at the top, instead of it just being an arch, it was a brain. And it was
no. And
I thought it was so funny. And they're like, we can't use this. I'm like, but it's kind of brilliant. I agree. It's totally off brand, but it's really funny.
Yeah.
We have one of those too, Amy. We have a bell tower that's our most iconic World War I memorial bell tower. It's reserved for the most special occasions. And someone created a logo where it was a rocket ship launching out of the ground. Yeah. Right, that's really cool, but no.
The best one I ever saw was Cal Lutheran's old identity was like a circle sunburst, and the Taekwondo club had drawn a fist punching through the sunburst and legitimately wanted to use it like they were serious. So everybody's got their creative takes, and though, I mean, that's where I would say, yeah, no, you don't mess with it. Like, you can't redraw the logo, but it is fun to see what people come up with.
That's great. So how can we create tools and strategies that are easy for units to produce professional on-brand communications?
I think, Brad, you're the master on this one.
Oh, well, I think it's kind of repetitive. Really getting engaged with what the campus community needs. We did that originally during the brand process, the brand research, and developing the platform. We do that monthly at our meetings with lead communicators. I try to meet at least annually with the deans, and we have talks about resources. So it's understanding the needs of the campus and investing in those things that are going to make the biggest difference, both from a visual and a message perspective. And then I think it's continually looking for ways to partner together. You know, we have grown from that because that's been effective to talking about what resources do you need. Our team currently houses 14 shared positions with colleges and units on campus where they sit with us and they're funded at least partially or entirely through one or two different colleges that'll share a position. And that has gone so far to really enhance the brand on our campus. It's had resource impacts that we expected, but it's had content and visual impacts just because those people are sitting with the main team that the colleges and we are very pleased with that are elevating the brand. So it's really looking for where can we add value wherever possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's that, again, it's that communication and collaboration, examples, templates.
Yeah,
all of those things are really key to creating that consistency. And again, it just makes people's jobs easier. And you don't, you know, as long as you avoid being like the creativity killer when you're reviewing those materials, you know, you want to give people leeway. Like one of the things that's been interesting on our campus is a few different offices have started using illustration. And they're very on-brand illustrations, but illustration isn't necessarily like allowed in our brand guidelines. But we've kind of, the central unit has allowed us to proceed with that, and they look great. And then now everybody's sharing the illustration assets so that when we're using illustration, we're using illustration consistently across campus. And that's just a great example of something that kind of sprung up through a creative exercise that now is actually becoming one of our brand assets that looks great across campus and is allowing people to be very effective.
Wonderful. I know at the University of Virginia, one of the things that we recommended, and it's made our lives so much easier, is on the brand website. If you have, of course, there's a whole bunch of photography that they provide. And at the bottom, though, now they have how many people have downloaded it. Which sounds silly, but there was, when they first launched it, no kidding, there was at least 4 different areas that had the exact same picture. My area was one of them on our main brochure because it was such a good picture. So we're like, oh, we're going to use these 2 students. They're diverse. There's different heights. It's really pretty. There's trees. Like, and everyone used that same picture. And so now you can see how often people are using them. And additionally, providing the templates in different platforms. Yeah. So not just doing the Adobe platforms. Without exaggeration, with my staff, we design, of course, in the Adobe Illustrator, InDesign, all that kind of good stuff. And then we put them as backgrounds in PowerPoint or Publisher, and then give them the areas that they can edit and give to them. And it just, putting it in a way that like, oh, I don't have the Adobe program, so I can't edit it. No, you can. Here you go.
Yeah, that's great. Smart.
All right, great. So I think we talked a little bit about building consensus and buy-in and support with students and alumni. I think Christy had a great example of the regents, having the regents sign off. Are there any additional tips that you have for that?
Well, I think you kind of need to look at it on 3 dimensions, right? So does everybody have the information they need to kind of understand what's going on, right? Why are we doing this? What's happening? Why is it important, right? Just the information. So I always think about it as inform, inspire, empower. So the information, the inspiration, how do I feel about it? Can I get excited about it? How does it impact my job? How does it make my job easier, better? How does it make us as a university more effective, more competitive, et cetera? And then empower is the stuff we've just been talking about, giving people the tools and assets that they need, and then trusting that they're going to go off and do that work well. So for, empower is probably less important for, say, alumni than it is for campus communicators. But you want to be thinking about all of those groups. And, Gallup has kind of an interesting way of looking at it, right? There's the people with high, if you call it information and inspiration, right? So high knowledge and high emotion. And those are your best people, right? They call them your heroes, or, those are your brand champions. And you want to do your best to create a lot of those people. Then you have, who we all deal with every day, you have your loose cannons, which is your high emotion, low information people, right? And those are the people who do the brain on the dome, right? Because they really care and they really want to do something fun and exciting, and they just don't have the information they need to do it within the brand guidelines. Those people are easy to change, right? Because it's just, we admire your passion. We love that you want to do this. Let's just give you a little information so you can do it more effectively. The harder two groups are the ones who have the information but don't care, right? So how do you activate those people and move them to that upper right quadrant? And then you've got your bystanders who just don't know, don't care. You're not going to impact. So I usually just sort of assume that there's going to be some percentage of those and let them go. And really the best effort that we can put in is to try to get those loose cannons into the champions by giving them the information that accompanies their inspiration.
I love that.
That's great. If I can just add, I think part of it is knowing the culture of your campus as well, knowing that there's not going to be one perfect way to do this. Mm-hmm. But over communication, Christy talked about the importance of communicating in that process. And fortunately, we own the communications channels on our campuses and we have access to them. And for us, I know it was, I don't know how many dozens of presentations that I did and that we did before, explaining to people why this was important in higher education, how it was going to improve things, what we were doing, what we found, what was next. And I think leadership is critical in that. Whoever's around that cabinet table, that leadership table, every meeting, just bringing a little bit of information in. Here's what we're doing. Here's why. Here's the success we're having. I know, at least in my experience, we are so focused on the potential and what could be that we are always looking ahead, communicating about the next thing. But we need to demonstrate our success to leadership more often, and especially if branding is new to your campus, that is so critical. And it's effective. It's just front of mind. Let them know what you're doing, show them how it's working, and helping them achieve the strategic goals of the institution. When that leadership buy-in makes all the difference. When your chancellor or president stands up, speaks the brand language, says this is important, people fall in line.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. So in a different direction, when do we need to involve an agency, and how can we best work with them when we do?
Well, Christy, you're the agency background person.
Yeah. So I can definitely. So I think we sort of already addressed the when do you need to involve an agency. I think when it's a big project, when it's high visibility or potentially controversial, I think those are good times to involve an agency. I think you can also. So from a brand strategy perspective, I would almost always recommend involving an agency, like developing that core idea. Brand architecture, I think, is probably more easily done in-house, and maybe even better done in-house, because it has, your your systems better and your units better. So maybe having an agency sort of provide some guidance on that initial pass, and then you really working through it with your campus partners to figure out how that's going to look in your own architecture. Brand identity, often a creative agency can be very helpful and can be very helpful in creating those first expressions of the identity. But, you know, even like we're working on a, I wouldn't even call it a brand strategy project, but a positioning project for one of our units right now. And we are involving a strategy firm to help us with that research and to recommend the positioning. And I think we'll also involve a firm at the creative standpoint, just to help us re-energize our creative materials based on this new brand idea or positioning idea, even though our brand identity isn't changing, right? So the logo is not going to change, but I think we could use a refreshed outsider's way of looking at how do we tell that story. And then we can build out all of those assets once we have that core idea. So that's all, you know, that's kind of how I think about involving agencies. I think getting the best out of them, you have to give them all the information that you can give them up front. If you withhold information, and I know a lot of people do this, they don't want the agency to know everything because somehow they think that if the agency knows everything, they'll like try to take over the world, or I don't know. But I think you're just a lot more effective just laying it out on the table. Everything from budget, like we can't go over $50,000, period. It like then the agency's bid might come back in at $49,990, but then when they have an overcharge, you say, look, dude, I told you had to bring it in at $49,990, so make it work. And then they know that they can own that. So I think it's the maximum transparency, the maximum information, the better. I think the other thing is if you're not happy with how things are going, say it right away. Mm-hmm. Because the other thing that can happen is that a project can kind of go down a path the agency thinks they're doing fine. You're griping about them, you know, behind the scenes, and then they don't have the opportunity to recalibrate or fix it. So I think to say it early and then to hold them accountable for when you're not happy with how things are going is a much better way to create effective results.
Yeah, they can't read your mind.
Yes, right. Right.
The only things I would add are, I agree completely with all that. If you're going to be doing a big collaboration building, focus groups, presenting to leadership, you want to make sure that your agency is a true partner, that they're not just going to come in and take it from you, that you're going to be engaged and involved. And remember, they are representing you while they're doing their work on campus. So you really have to think through that as well. Are these the people who are going to best represent our organization? Even to the point, I think of a couple times we've used different agencies for the brand strategy, presenting to the cabinet, presenting to the board. You know, it wasn't an environment where we wanted, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but 20-somethings in jeans and big beards and spiky hair coming in and presented. It just wouldn't have been the right fit. Yeah. So who are you working with at the agency? And we had another one that was much more creative, and that was the right fit for those same groups. They could get away with that. So really thinking through, are they going to be a great partner, and how are they going to represent you on campus? Because you're going to own that as soon as they leave campus.
Yeah.
I think you're definitely right. Well, I would like to thank both of you, Christy and Brad, for your help and your information. This is incredibly valuable, and it was great to get to learn from you today.
Thanks. Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Great. And thank you again to everyone who watched, and to our program sponsor, M. Stoner, and to everyone watching. Have a great day.
Bye.